course, my controls just went away because I'm trying to do so much fun at one time. Welcome to an official Tribe Talk versus a happy hour. I'm so glad that you guys are here tonight. As usual, we have the purpose slide, a group of great like-minded people who have more in common than they have differences. The whole intent here is to enhance communications amongst rider coaches, sharing our experiences and ideas for the betterment of the tribe. And most importantly, the disclaimer is that this is an independent event. We're not sponsored by any organization with the one simple motive that we're just looking for improvement to create better motorcyclists. Tribe Talk etiquette. I've seen we have a few new people out there tonight. So if you're not speaking, please try to keep everything muted. If you want to jump into a conversation and it looks difficult to get in or hears difficult to get in, you can raise your hand, and those controls are available on the participant list. We'll accept text questions in Facebook and Zoom, and I will see if I can get somebody to kind of monitor that for me tonight, if you would please, to share if I don't see what's going on. And then because we have some new people tonight, if you can, please change your name to your first name, last name, and where you're from on the Zoom screen. That allows everybody else the opportunity to know who you are. Lurkers are welcome. If there are technical difficulties, please jump back on. If you lose me, somebody take over and we'll keep rocking. Topics for tonight. I wanted to quickly go over the Tribe Talk structure simply because not everybody has been privy to that information. And so there's a little bit of reading involved with that. Try not to talk your ears off while you're doing it. And then just a quick covering of the value of communications between us as rider coaches, instructors. And then I wanted to make sure that I reminded everybody this, or at least give you the opportunity if you haven't heard this yet, that the Institute for Two-Wheel Motorcycle Safety in Germany, kind of the MSF equivalent, will be provided the International Motorcycle Conference this year for free. And so if you write down or if you send me an email and ask me this later, I can get you the link, or you can search for it, Google it, it'll come up. The ifz.de Motorcycle Conference. And the reason why I'd like to share that is because a little bit different than IRETS, this is heavily engineering and technical based kind of a conference. Although there's a little bit of everything there, the fact that it's free is pretty awesome. And they will be doing it for the entire month of September, where they'll post presentations for you to view, basically videos. And then October 6th, there's the opportunity to ask the presenters questions. So pretty cool way of what they're doing with this conference. Lastly, if you're a member of SMSA, a reminder that 16 September is the business meeting. So if you're a part of that, please check out your emails. If you need help getting to that, let me know. Tribe Talk tonight. Sorry for all the information up front. Just wanted to get it out. We're going to go over the structure and intent a little bit. And I wanted to start with some of these numbers and ask everybody the question, is this a lot of people?
I don't know. I guess it could be a lot of people, but one question I have is the over 5,000 certified BRC versus the 3,700 BRC in the previous curriculum. Seems like we got a lot more coaches now. Am I looking
Well,
at reading this right?
well, just because they're certified in BRC 2013 doesn't mean they're certified in the BRCU. However, those that are BRCU are more than likely back certified into 2013.
But not always. I am
Not always.
BRCU certified, but not 2013.
Right. If you're within the last 2 or 3 years, there's a potential not. But I believe in one of the VRETs or maybe in Tribe Talks, you heard Ray say there's about 5,500 total coaches.
I mean, if you look at it this way, out of 5,216 certified BRCU, you divide it out by the states, it's only 100 coaches per state.
Okay, some states are larger than others too. Like Delaware, I think, has maybe only 20 or 30 coaches.
And then when you get to the QAS or the RCT, I mean, you're only looking at like 4 per state.
Okay. So why do you think I bring these numbers up?
You have an ulterior motive.
Always, always. I'm sorry, I'm looking at everybody's faces over here.
Yeah, but there are some figures that are even smaller, or some numbers that are even smaller when you get into the advanced instructors.
Sure, but
How many people are certified in the ARC?
I didn't want to go that deep into it, and the reason is the majority of everybody that coaches the BRC. That's the meat of almost all rider training, is it not? So if there's 5,216 or somewhere around 5,500 rider coaches, why don't we see more participation in the RiderChoices forums, in places like Tribe Talk? Maybe I got a slide for this. No, I don't. Why don't we see more people participating in getting together and sharing information and learning? There's, I think, over 1,000, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 in the MSF Rider Coach group on Facebook, and a similar amount on the HDRA Rider Coach forum on Facebook. But yet, you know, getting everybody to come together and talk just seems to be a lot harder than it should be. And so that's kind of why I brought Tribe Talk to the forefront. After talking to so many people that are close with me, we all decided there needed to be a way to interact and talk with each other and maybe find a way to improve the culture. So there's a big laundry list there on the screen. Can you read that okay, or is it too small? I'll give you a little bit of time to read it. But the big thing I was looking for was connection with other rider coaches to learn from. And, you know, you don't have to be certified in all the fancy stuff. If you're a rider coach, like I'm a rider coach, that's what's important, because everything beyond that comes from experience and learning and where you want to go to, motivation perhaps. So wouldn't it be really cool if we had a place where we could all come together and talk about things like being a rider coach and the problems that we have and the successes we have, and share with other people. So that was kind of the whole catalyst for forming Tribe Talk and why we came together. Is everybody finished reading? Head nods are okay. All right. So, and if you want a copy of this, I'll post it with the video in a couple days after I get the editing done. So the original concept was to, on Wednesday nights, and we're still really good about this, to have a free-flowing, organic conversation, just whatever comes up. Now, sometimes we interject our, things that we're working on, but for the most part, it's just us getting together. And I think that's been very successful. And then originally every week on Sunday, we were having context-based information, kind of scripted, kind of like this, where somebody presents some of their thoughts, and then we can have a good discussion about that. But I found as time went on, not everybody was as motivated to continue that. So we've reduced it to once a month at this point. And really the difficulty here is finding people that want to share their ideas and thoughts. Once again, rider coach to rider coach, low threat environment. We all know somebody that has something to share. Mark Wise just jumped on. He's a key example of that. Whenever you talk to Mark, something good comes out of it. So we're having problems having people give us content to use. So I want you to think about that, if you would please. Originally, I had this big scripted thing about this is what's going to happen on this day, and this what's going to happen on this day. And you can kind of see how it came together. And then it got overwhelming for one person. When we had a group of people assisting, it worked out pretty well because we could share the wealth. That kind of went away. So once again, had to slow everything down and do more of the organic, just discussion stuff than actually sharing context. This was the original kind of structure script. We started out with 2 topics per conversation on Sundays. Now we're down to 1 because it's hard to fit and have good discussion in the unlimited hour that we have to get together. But if you would please read that orange box, because I think that's the most important part of this particular slide. If we are dependent learners, and when I say dependent upon somebody else to feed us information, it becomes very slow and arduous and difficult to have content continually generated to share with other people. But if we're self-directed, meaning that everybody participates, everybody's active, we have volunteers, and we are able to find people to present information, it becomes a lot easier. In fact, it self-replicates itself. I know that was redundant from the Office of Redundancy. And this one's a little bit harder to read, but part of the gist I have gotten or have received or have learned from being around MSF for at least 10 years is that rarely do they just feed you information. It is a self-driven, self-motivated, self-managed way of getting better or becoming better. And so one of the ways I really feel we could all get better is if more people joined in to things like Tribe Talk and started sharing more with each other and not waiting for somebody else to do it. And if possible, I hope this gives you a little bit of thought in that maybe if you step forward and be a little bit vulnerable and share with other people, you can see how it can propagate so that more people would like to do it. In a recent conversation with somebody, and I shared this slide deck with, they actually thought the same thing would happen. But even though we're 6 months into this, it seems like it's getting old. So I'm going to look a little bit for your feedback tonight to see what we can do. to make things better. So that was a quick dump on the tribe talk structure. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's Mark in Arizona. I think that a part of the problem is that at least at the program level, where most of us spend our time, the culture seems to be so extremely competitive often and so very judgmental that people are afraid to voice opinions.
Has anybody felt judged being here other than Ron Hines?
I don't think we have, and that's why we come here. But there is other people that I've tried to get to be here, and even people at the rider coach trainer level that don't want to come for that reason, because they feel that even though it's not really, I've experienced it, it's great. It's just trying to convince some people to be vulnerable, I guess. Maybe they're not ready to be vulnerable, or they don't feel like being vulnerable, vulnerable. Yeah, I can't even talk today. Hey, I just did a 12-hour range, so double range.
We love you, man. It's okay.
I see Josh's point. Being vulnerable and exposing your own weaknesses and asking questions is hard for a lot of people. It's definitely difficult to facilitate a culture where that is it's easy to facilitate the culture where that's accepted, but it's hard to get people to do it.
You got to build trust and buy-in. I think that's the big thing. And you have to build that safety and that security that, everyone's going to maintain professionalism and is going to respect people. Because if you don't have that, then people, I find, are less likely to be honest and open and to be willing to share. So you have to build that strong rapport. And usually that takes some time, I've found throughout the years.
Yeah, just as an example, I was recently approached by a coach from another program, working a large program. They're like 70 or 80 coaches. They're training thousands of riders a year at multiple training sites. And he was interested in moving over to our program. And when I started talking with him, he's been a coach for 2 years. He doesn't teach classroom because he's not allowed to. He's not good enough yet. He hasn't achieved that level in his program. And there are certain coaches that do all the classroom, and they're the high level coaches, and they've got this ranking system that they work with. And how are we going to get someone who that's the culture that they're in? How do we get them to look beyond that if that's where they've been trained and that's what they've been indoctrinated with? The program that I work with every day, there are only 14 of us. And to the best of my knowledge, only one of the other coaches visits Tribe Talk. He's usually on Facebook, so I don't think he's appeared yet, but he's usually there in the background. But and we're a program where everyone has an equal voice. Somebody fresh out of rider coach prep can suggest a change. Everybody, not just me, everybody listens to it, and we adapt and adopt and discard as necessary ideas. But from what I understand here, we're definitely the exceptions.
I think sometimes we might be overthinking this because a lot of people, sometimes it's their family life that gets in the way of it, where they're not able to have the time. And also my husband, Bob, would like to interject because he is having the same issues with aviation.
Yeah, many of you may know I'm chairman of the National Association of Flight Instructors, and what we have found in our organization and in getting people to participate with us is, excuse me, is we have really driven the social media side really hard, and that has gotten people to come in and join in our monthly webinars and all that. I invite all of you to take a look. Just search for NAFI, N-A-F-I, on Facebook and LinkedIn and other venues, and you'll see we're all over the place. And that's what's driving new members and people to come to our webinars and so on.
Ron, you've had your blue hand up for a while. Do you have something to add?
I don't know. After you're picking on me here, I don't know. Yeah, I've been jotting down some notes as everybody's been talking, and all good, valid points. Number one, for the most part, most rider coaches are part-time. So they have other interests. Myself, I'm a site administrator. I own my own site, so I'm heavily involved with every facet of the organization, if you will, of making sure my coaches have what they need, making sure that everything runs smoothly, making sure that I give them the information, help them to become more rounded, give them tips, just like they do with the students. Number two, this whole hierarchy of being MSF based is, I guess I'd say, pretty contrary to what you're trying to do. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy this. I like stepping on my own toes every now and then, because I'm sure that somebody will help me to give me a different view of something I could do better. So thank you for that. A lot of times, rider coaches need permission. And how do I tactfully say that MSF really doesn't give them permission? They've gone through, we've all gone through a 8-day boot camp, being told that you must read the cards, you must do this, this is your structure, you cannot deviate, this is what you must do, you are here. Oh, blinders, no going outside the box. And then when we get to our sites and things are a little different, they remember that they were told that they have the latest, greatest, most up-to-date information, and they are ready to go out and tame the world. And they get back to their sites and things are a little different, and they say, well, that's not how we were taught. So maybe the structured flexibility aspect doesn't give them permission to see something in a different light. And I may be going way off on a tangent here, but that's kind of what I see happening. So thank you for listening. Go ahead, beat me up now.
I wouldn't do that. I think you have some very valid points, Ron. And I've wrestled with the part-time versus full-time discussion a lot. And based off of that, how many people would be interested in a full-time professional
I lost you.
job as a rider coach, and that's the only thing you do?
It is the only thing I do, but I'm kind of don't have a full-time job, so I just enjoy life and teach when I can. But also another point for this is I have been certified in 4 different states. Every state, every program has nuances, and keeping them all straight is kind of interesting for me at times.
That gets to another conversation we've had before.
Yeah, Don, I would have to agree with Carol on a ways, because I teach in 2 states, Missouri and Illinois, whereas Carol has those 2 plus I think Nebraska, Iowa. I don't know, maybe Colorado, New York, who knows? But anyway, there is some differences between the 2 states that I teach in and how the curriculum is presented. It is covered according to the RCG that MSF puts out. But the communications, as far as us rider coaches is concerned, if we can remember when we're teaching with other coaches, say, hey, do you ever been on Tribe Talk? You ever come? Why don't you come to Tribe Talk, Happy Hour Tribe Talk, and so forth. The idea is just get the word out from all of us that have been coming here since this started up. What, 6 months ago, 4 months ago?
6 months.
Okay, I didn't get the memo that early. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Hey,
Carol
John, we
didn't
got a
tell me.
couple of people with questions and comments. So Jeanette says, I agree with everyone's comments. I think another issue with quantity of participants is coaches committing to coaching. And then she also said she coaches as her primary job. And then Betsy says, simple issue, how aware of Tribe Talk are rider coaches around the country? I came to it late and only because of Lynn Vandewater sent all of us information about it. Don't think there have been any other folks besides Lynn and myself on Tribe Talk. Seeing a benefit and having the willingness to ask questions, self-examine and learn are things not everyone is interested in doing, unfortunately. And then John says, does Tribe Talk need its own Facebook page? And then Cindy said, it would need to pay more than my full-time job.
I agree, Cindy.
Well, as a lot of people know, every state pays the rider coaches differently. You know, I don't know what it is in other states, but Missouri and Illinois, depending on the site, is close in proximity.
In Wisconsin, I am familiar. I've worked at 2 different sites. There's a $9 an hour pay difference between those 2 sites. I have spoken with a coach from another site, and there's a $12 an hour pay difference even farther in one direction than one of the sites. So it varies almost better than $20 an hour in Wisconsin, depending on site.
So,
just real quick, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, man.
Okay, I'm using a new pair of Bluetooth headphones, and I just want to make sure I'm coming through okay.
Very clear. So just so everybody knows, about every week I add 50 to 60 people, and I usually place geographical considerations above all else to get a little bit of somebody from everywhere. And I'm sure not everybody who receives an email says, this is for me. I get that. I would just, I'm trying to formulate a way for us to talk to more of people like us so that we get a better idea about everything we're talking about and things that we may not be considering someplace else. So, John, I don't know about the Facebook page. Well, that's another thing to manage, isn't it? So with that, and based upon what Dennis just said about communication, let's talk about rider coach communications. Nice segue, man. You helped me out. Here's a definition of communication. Would somebody mind reading that?
A process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. The function of pheromones in insect communication, also exchange of information. B, personal rapport, a lack of communication between old and young persons.
I kind of liked that, and I'll explain that better in the future when I kind of discuss some of the research I've done recently on candidate selection. But I thought that was probably the best definition of communications. So with that, why is communication important?
Without
Helps
communication,
to build common understanding.
Okay, common understanding. What else do we have there?
yeah, without communication, how can we do our job as rider coaches effectively?
Okay.
I'm going to give you an example. I talked with a coach last weekend up in Iowa. Never met him before, or well, I met him before once, but had never taught with them. And at some point, one of the students said, you guys work very well together. I said, this is the first time we've actually worked together. So we were on the same page, teaching the same stuff, and it flowed very nicely. So if we're all trained very well, and we work with each other, and there were times when I would just pull him aside and say, hey, you want to do it? Is this the way you would do it? And he'd say yes, and it's like, it just flowed. So you have to pull each other aside at times and communicate with each other, and the students don't even know any different. They can think you're talking about the weather.
And sometimes you are. So you bring up a great topic. When does the communication happen?
Communication is happening all the time. From the time we get close enough to each other to read each other's body language, to get signs or signals, or even verbal communication.
Actually, it even starts before the students arrive. It should start before the students arrive, because that way you kind of set the baseline with whoever you're working with, how you're going to run the exercises, and who's going to do what, and how you're alternating the exercises and running them.
I would agree with that statement. Anything else?
I would just add that if we have a rapport, sort of like what Carol was talking about, there's a parallel process, I think. It sets the stage for the students to be more comfortable in creating a learning environment for themselves as well. So there's lots of benefits on all levels to having good communication.
The one thing I've learned with teaching with other coaches, and most of them I've taught with more than once or many a times over the years, is the fact if you can communicate without even communicating, just by your sign language or something, and when you're out on the range as an example, that communication to me makes the class go better, smoother, and as Betsy just said, it helps the students. If I heard her correctly.
So, let's think about maybe going to college or a high school. I hope everybody in here has been to high school. If the teachers only communicated right before class or right after class, do you think everything would go smoothly in a high school environment?
It's constant communication between us.
Constant communication.
Yeah, because even when I'm on the range, if whoever I'm working with, I'm constantly I'm not only observing my students, I'm observing the other rider coach to make sure that they're seeing what I'm seeing. And once we reach our time, and if the students are all doing well, we'll give each other a thumbs up or the stage signal, and that way we are communicating with each other, even if the students don't know it.
So when, following the same timeline that we just discussed, when should communication happen? Should it happen when we're not coaching?
Communication should happen at all times. Even when you're not in class, you're emailing back and forth. Sometimes you might call them to clarify things. The communication flow should be pretty constant and continuous, but not overwhelming.
How many people get together with other rider coaches, say monthly or quarterly, just to get together? COVID aside?
I think
You
it
mean
really
other than tribe-
depends.
Other than tribe talks?
Yeah, other than tribe talk.
Well, I know in our area when a range needs painting, there's usually a group that is an email that's sent out. Those that participate in it, of course, that's the time when we can talk very openly. And then usually afterwards, a group of us will also go out for a meal, which continues the talking and the communication.
Is that helpful when you are coaching?
It's about relationships.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I've done, get-togethers, rides, meals with other rider coaches, and we just kind of build kind of a bond or a rapport, and we all end up working pretty good together.
So I know there are several people in this group that do it more than letting people know. I mean, I seen Laura had her thumb up. I'm pretty sure Mark does. We know Lynn has talked about it several times. I know in Indiana, we had a particular site that once a month they got together to eat. And then when they were there eating, because they're all rider coaches, what do you think happens? They start talking about ways to better the site. And it was one of the better sites because they had that commitment to each other to make it better. So I think that is a really good example of what good communication would be like. And then I'll jump off just a little bit on the topic because there have been times in my life where I've been involved with quality assurance, or where I've had to look at organizations and see, what's the problem here? Give a quality assurance assessment of somebody. And hands down, regardless of what other problem they have, all the other problems were generally caused by a lack of communication. So my next question then to everybody is, how can we improve it?
I think it goes back to keeping channels open and getting away from when Ron referred to the boot camp style training that so many of us went through, and getting rid of that atmosphere. I don't think it necessarily comes from MSF any longer. Maybe not since the BRC, but it did at one time. And getting rid of that and making things open. Breaking down the hierarchies that exist, the expectations that rider coaches are led to believe that they must have, among themselves and expectations among others. I mean, yeah, I'm a rider coach trainer, but I only consider myself actually being a rider coach trainer for 11 or 12 days a year when I'm actually conducting a prep or certification workshops. When I'm teaching class, I'm of exactly the same I don't know what term to use, but I expect my coaches to have the same expectations of me as that exactly the same that I have of them. We work as equal partners, and but in programs that do that, it seems to really facilitate the quality of their classes and of the program's growth. And programs that don't do that seem to be the programs that have higher turnover rates and more difficulties with coaches going off on their own and conducting not necessarily recognizable versions of curriculum. So I think breaking things down to a, I don't know, a friendlier level, maybe non-competitive level, maybe that should be it, would go a long ways.
You brought this up a couple times now, Mark, and it basically goes back to the hierarchies, where I think your first comment was that there are groups of people who, you know, only do on-range stuff, only do classroom stuff. And the hierarchy, and I've heard this several times, Rider Coach 1 and Rider Coach 2. Do you think that's a holdover from the older BRC, before BRC, RSF? Is that the holdover that we're getting when you start to see those hierarchies?
But I think it's kind of funny to call, yes, it's pre-BRC, but when you consider how many people are still in this field from that time, it's kind of hard to consider it a holdover, since very few from back then are still involved. It's something that sort of has been adopted, you know, is rankings and hierarchies. I'm a level 1 coach, a level 2 coach, level 3 coach, level 4 coach, and we have that. Somebody once asked me about that, and I said, yeah, they asked me, they said, yeah, Mark's a level 4 coach. And I was like, nah, I said, occasionally it probably happens, but it's not a very good day. It's not something that can be sustained. It's something that occurs. It's like the time when you're out riding and you hit a corner absolutely perfectly, and you think about it afterwards, you go, boy, I wish I could do that again, or I knew what I did. But it's treated as if it's permanent. It's this whole problem with labeling.
Okay, so how do we break down these hierarchies? Any recommendations for the community?
When people ask me about it, I say I deny that it exists. Who's C1, C2? It's like, what do you mean C1 and C2? There's a class and there are 2 coaches. Well, who does what? And it's like, well, that's up to the 2 of us to decide who does what. Do you want to read the cards? I'll go set up the cones. That's actually the way that I conduct things in a rider coach prep. That
as far as range, I completely agree with you. The only difference between C1 and C2 at my site is the C1 is the classroom instructor. C2s are not present for classroom because they don't need to be. But range, you can't tell the difference, and you shouldn't. I don't think that you should be able to tell the difference.
So in that situation, do the 2 coaches alternate who does the classroom map?
At my program, it's up to them. I go, okay, Dennis and Don, you're teaching class this weekend. The 2 of you need to communicate with each other and figure out who's doing what. I don't really even need to know. At the end when you get paid, yeah, it'll make a difference which boxes you check off, but sometimes I'll drop by and there'll be 2 coaches in the classroom. Usually there's only 1. They'll both be there on the range, but who's doing what is up to them. The only time it would make a difference is if maybe when we have brand new coaches who haven't yet taught enough classes to have state certification, so then we have to be careful of how we balance things in case we were to get some sort of a surprise audit, or that we've got a new coach who may need some support.
Does it help or hinder that we identify people as rider coach trainers or QAS or certified in this or certified in that when it comes to not having a hierarchy?
I'm actually going to step back a little bit on you, Don, because it's really not about who's C1 and C2. It's about our students, and that's what it should really be about. We should all be doing the best we can for our students.
I'm glad you bring that up, Carol, because a lot of times when I'm thinking about things from my perspective, I use the student model in asking why rider coaches don't treat each other like we treat students. Did that come out weird? Shouldn't we be
Well,
treating...
yeah, and I know
Go ahead.
in the chat somebody had mentioned that we're afraid, some rider coaches are afraid to self-assess. Well, we really shouldn't be afraid to self-assess, because guess what? We're asking our students to. We should be able to do the same.
A lot of quiet people out here tonight.
I found that depending upon the years, the personality, there's many factors. Some coaches are more, they have less patience. And so they're just like, fine, I'll just do it. Or they'll try and shove people in, and they don't provide like the right learning environment or the learning style or the right way to handle their co-coach. And the co-coach may feel like they're attacking them or they're putting them on the spot. And so it comes down to a lot of miscommunication, I've found. And that's the biggest problem. And people don't trust each other as, they're like, okay, let's just do this. Let's just stick to the curriculum. And that kind of seems, yeah, you want to stick to the curriculum, of course. But it's like, it kind of seems like a blanket thing. Like, I don't want to get to know you. I don't want to do the hard work to kind of figure out, how to work best with you. Unfortunately, some do, some don't. I'm not speaking for everybody, but I've seen it enough times. And then they just kind of like, okay, well, I just won't work with this person again. And it's like, no, that's not solving the problem. You're just avoiding issues. Well, I don't need this job. And it's just like, you hear all this complaining, and it's just like, is it about you? Is it about the students? And that's what I ask them. I'm like, if it's about you, then, there's your problem. You need to get out of the way. You need that humble pie. I eat it every morning. It keeps me straight. But, some days I trip and fall on my face, and that's okay. It's just being vulnerable and realizing that you don't have all the answers and being open to that. And the issue is people being open and not feeling like, is this other coach approachable? Especially if they're like a new coach and like, oh, well, I just learned how to do this. Sometimes I find that they're like, oh, well, they've been doing this longer and I don't want to step on toes and I don't want them to report me being bad, so I lose classes. And it's like, no, they should feel safe. But, they'll feel safe if there's like us around as administrators or trainers. But like, if we're not there, then it's like, oh, well, it's their word against mine, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff, unfortunately.
How many here have worked with a new rider coach and they tell you something they learned at the prep and you're like, man, I've never thought of it that way before. I wish I would have known that a little bit sooner, like 5 years ago. Anybody? Yeah, got a couple thumbs up there. So because Bob, Carol's husband, has put a thought in my mind when dealing with aviation in the past. In our aircraft, we had 2 pilots and 2 crew members. And when we boarded that aircraft, we always worked at it as a team. The pilots only controlled the first 10 feet of the aircraft. The crew members controlled the other 60 feet of the aircraft. And so when we got in the cockpit, everybody had a voice. Everybody's voice was equal. And if everybody didn't agree that we were going to do something, then we didn't do it. So I wonder if maybe what air crews would call crew coordination and the training they get for that wouldn't be beneficial for rider coach coordination, rider coach communication, and see how it would be better as a group to discuss these things a little bit more.
Don, this is Bob, the other half of Carol and Bob. Yeah, it's crew resource management, or which is the term of art these days, is really a big deal, and that is explicitly trained by the airlines today, by any multi-person crew organization, whether it's the military or civilian. And it is a big deal. It is specifically trained. And one point I wanted to toss at you while you're talking about this, because it goes along with relationships and communication, is that good communication is conscious and is trained. You have to actually be a really good communicator, and you're one, Don, you're doing it. You have to think about it, and you have to train other people to think about it. It's not, and that's one of the hardest things to do. Over.
Roger, out. So I guess I'll kind of leave it at that. We're approaching that hour. And so let me go to the next slide. What? Let's stop the share here. Guess what time it is, people? Tribe Talk poll for 30 August 2020. Poll is up. Can everybody see that okay? If you're not on a computer or a manageable device, it may be more difficult for you. So if you are, I'll read it off here, and you can kind of just mark yourself a little answer. The first question is, the best way to brake is to. First answer is A, use the front brake first to the 40% efficiency level, then apply the rear brake to the 90% efficiency level. Or B, use the brake simultaneously, but with more pressure on the rear brake than on the front brake, unless going downhill. C, use both brakes simultaneously, using the amount of pressure necessary for maximum efficiency and smoothest operation. D, use 4 fingers on the front brake lever for emergency braking and 2 fingers on the front brake for mild braking, and avoid using the rear brake. And then E, measure the amount of brake pads and pedal lever play so you know how much free play there is when applying the brakes. I did not write these. If you're giving a giggle, maybe that was on purpose. Wow. The second question, when making a tight U-turn, A, coordinate hand, foot, and body movements in a controlled manner and turn the handlebars sharply. B, the first step is to move body position to the outside of the direction of the turn and simultaneously squeeze the clutch. C, it is best to lean before turning the handlebars in the direction you want to go. D, coordinate hand, foot, and body movements in a controlled manner and counter steer to make them turn as sharply as possible. And E, slow to an appropriate speed. Initiate lean by pressing the hand grip. Turn the handlebars when looking down at your intended path of travel. We're at about 7 of 17, 8, 50%. Give it a few more seconds here. Cindy says F, none of the above. I don't know. 15 of 17, I'm assuming that everybody who could vote did vote. Let me see, where are we? We'll give it another 15 seconds. Pretty strong on the voting tonight. People are sure of themselves. Am I in polling? So everybody chose C on the first question. The best way to brake is to use both brakes simultaneously, using the amount of pressure necessary for maximum efficiency and smoothest operation. Now, it's either going to be really good or really bad. What do you think? 100% of those who voted were correct. When making a tight turn, the answer is to coordinate hand, foot, and body movements in a controlled manner and turn the handlebars sharp. A, 63% correct. Give me a second, I'm going to make some pictures of this. For posterity.
Hey, I got a little comment. I had a student a couple weeks ago make a comment about the test that we give. She said, it must have been written by a man because it doesn't make, some of those questions just don't make sense.
She would be real surprised to find out that it may not have been. I didn't share the results, I'm sorry. And I think the best answer tonight was Cindy Baker, none of the above. And back to the shared screen. So once again, how to build the tribe. Up to this point, these are the best things I could think of. Invite others to participate. If you're new tonight, please bring whomever you want next time. Share the message. Still looking for a volunteer to host and present. Anything you want to talk about is okay. Anything that can be related to what we do. Be a motivated mentor or a mentored person. I can't tell you how much I learn weekly from all you all, giving me emails and messages. So I really appreciate those who do. And lastly, have a happy Labor Day weekend. I know it's coming up next weekend, and I don't know about you all, but I'm going to take some time off and go visit some family. Next, Tribe Talk, September 27th. If you have problems with that, let me know. We talked a little bit about the structure tonight, the value of communications with rider coaches, and we've taken the weekly poll. Remember that Tribe Talk Happy Hour continues every Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's always fun to just talk with y'all. So I hope to see you then. Does anybody have any alibis from tonight? I know it was a little bit heavy stuff. It is what it is.
And I thought the subject of communication was very good. We could always improve on our own communications. So to me, that's something that is always something you learn every day of your life, not only as a rider coach, but in everyday life.
That is true, Dennis. I will tell you from research, all the things that we seem to be talking about on Tribe Talk and Tribe Talk Happy Hour relates back to a single phrase, and it's called emotional intelligence. It's hard to measure, but there are a lot of good definitions out there, and if you're interested in it, maybe you'll look it up. If you need a reference, Mr. Daniel Goleman is kind of the guy who's outlined a lot of what emotional intelligence is. And hopefully I'll share more with you soon. If that is it, thank you very much for attending tonight. Only 3 minutes over. I appreciate you. Take care, be safe, and go train some riders.
Be safe.
Good night, everybody. Thanks, Don. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, Don, thanks.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.